A member of the National Public Radio editorial staff, NPR, is ripping his own employer over its political bias.
After a while, we started covering Trump in a way that we were trying to damage his presidency, to find anything we could to harm him.
During Bob Mueller's Russia investigation, he says, NPR had Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff on 25 times and followed his talking points on alleged collusion. When no collusion was found, NPR quickly moved on from Russiagate and with no accountability.
So obviously NPR didn't think a lot about the Hunter Biden laptop story.
No, and I vividly remember when NPR managing editor Terrence Samuel said this: "We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions." A year and a half later, as you recall, major news outlets confirmed the authenticity of the laptop. NPR issued a document on transgender coverage asking staffers to avoid the term biological sex. Other biases, says Berliner, a coming climate apocalypse, and constantly highlighting the suffering of Palestinians while downplaying the brutal Hamas atrocities against Israel that started the war on October 7th. The common thread here, Brett, is silencing dissenting opinion.
Defund NPR.
Mr. Reagan.
A new CEO has been hired by NPR, and she is a real radical leftist. And so conservatives on Twitter, they are now calling for the defunding of NPR. As I'm sure you know, NPR is partly funded by our tax dollars, which is ridiculous because they exclusively push a far-left agenda. Elon Musk is really pushing for this, and Christopher Rufo has been exposing this woman, the new CEO, on Twitter.
Rufo, you got in trouble. They said you are targeting her. How dare you?
Yeah, that's right. I've spent the last day or two digging through her tweets and to show people exactly what she believes. It's actually incredible. I mean, it is the most vapid left-wing propaganda imaginable.
For our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done.
The number one challenge here that we see and is, of course, the First Amendment in the United States is a fairly robust protection of rights. And that is a protection of rights both for platforms, which I actually think is very important, that platforms have those rights to be able to regulate what kind of content they want on their sites. But it also means that it is a little bit tricky to really address some of the real challenges of where does bad information come from and sort of the influence peddlers who have made a real market economy around it.
Honestly, this has all gone way too far. I'm doing another video that I will be posting very soon about how the left's philosophy is a kind of fairy tale. And these people, they now live in a kind of a fairy tale universe where provable facts are ignored and fantasies are indulged. And we just can't have people in serious positions in government or in the private sector who live in a fairy tale world. We need serious positions to be held by serious people. And look, I'll tell you what, this is going to come as a surprise to you, but I actually love NPR. That might sound crazy, but I do. I love it. I haven't listened to it in years, but I used to listen to it every single day. Why? Because NPR is a priceless insight into the mind of the radical left. And on top of that, the dry, monotone delivery that has become emblematic of NPR presenters is actually hilarious.
Please welcome the owner of Seasons Eatings, Pete Schweddy. Tell us about your balls, Pete.
Well, over at Seasons Eatings, we have balls for every taste. Popcorn balls, cheese balls, rum balls, you name it.
Wow. My mouth's watering just thinking about those balls.
It's been years since I've seen any balls.
They're bigger than I expected.
They're made from a secret Schweddy family recipe. No one can resist my Schweddy balls.
But NPR is more than just ridiculous leftist takes packaged in an absurd monotone delivery. No, The NPR producers, the presenters, and the so-called journalists over there, they take themselves very seriously. And that, too, is actually quite comical. And so a lot of the stuff that they present is just pure comedy. All right, so if I love NPR so much for the valuable insight it provides for the mindset of the radical left, why did I stop listening? Well, I will explain that in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. You guys know as well as anyone that gold equals stability. With the unpredictable stock market and economic turmoil, gold shines as a safe haven. Bishop Gold Group is America's trusted precious metals dealer, and they offer refuge from financial uncertainty. Protect your retirement from the looming threats of taxes and penalties by investing in gold. Don't wait for the next market crash. Now is the time to safeguard your wealth by converting stocks and retirement funds into gold. Unlike volatile digital assets, holding physical gold puts security directly into your hands. Trust Bishop Gold Group to guide you through securing your retirement with the stability of precious metals. And Bishop is offering up to $10,000 in free silver with a qualified purchase. So call 833-703-4138 or go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Reagan or click the link in the description below to start investing in gold today.
As slavery ended, Black people gained rights. Obviously, white supremacy is trying to maintain the power structure. So celebrating a thin white body as the ideal body is a way to other and demonize Black and brown bodies, bigger bodies, anyone who doesn't fit into that norm. So this is really about maintaining systems of white supremacy and patriarchy.
Whiteness always includes an element of desire for Blackness, even as they're trying to distance themselves from us.
I feel like I can't speak without acknowledging the fetishization and the obsession that comes from wanting to consume Black bodies.
I love this book. You love this book? Awesome!
Sounds like a pretty ordinary story hour at the New York Public Library, and it is to everyone there. But it's also drag queen story hour. The reader is Harmonica Sunbeam. She's dressed in a fabulous rainbow-colored sequined outfit. Sunbeam is one of many readers who participate in chapters of the Drag Queen Story Hour.
I think queer culture in general is really attractive. It's interesting for everybody of all ages to kind of explore and see what possibilities are like beyond the binary. When kids experience drag, it's like going to Disney World or seeing a superhero or your favorite cartoon character or comic book character. It's exaggerated, over-the-top theatricalness.
What is your goal in reading to them besides just, having a great time?
To teach children that there is otherness in the world. You're going to meet non-binary people. You're going to meet gay people. You're going to meet a drag performer, a drag king, a drag queen in your life. And we use the art of drag in our literacy program to promote that. The books we read do have certain messages that do get the point across.
3 precocious little kids in a Barbie ad is nothing new. Except for the first time, one of them is a boy.
Barbie, so fierce.
Barbie is a brand that is all about imagination and storytelling, whether you're a boy or a girl.
Trad wives, as you've written, very often reject both capitalism and feminism. So that's like a lot to hold already at once. But you also say that there is a fear coming through.
If you watch these videos, they almost have a kind of lonely aspect to them. The trad wife really only spends time with one man, which is her husband, and other men, male friends, coworkers, obviously, they're not in the picture. So she's actually managed to limit her contact with men in a really drastic fashion. This is all speculation, but I wonder how much of that is a reaction to Me Too, right?
Me Too is about the workplace. That work could make you vulnerable.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of women came out of that experience feeling almost like it was impossible to trust individual men. And I can see how a trad wife would say, what if I can just leave that all behind, choose one man who I actually don't really have to spend that much time with because he's always at work, and feel safer. But of course, that comes with this price, right? Which is that you have to always defer to your husband.
Yes. Okay, so what if a woman just wants to stay at home and isn't thinking about all this. What's wrong with that?
I think it's really hard to make that a neutral political choice.
Hiking while black. Why would the Appalachian Trail and maybe other American wilderness or outdoor spaces be generally so white? What is that about?
Racism, a history of racism in America, a history of vulnerability in the woods.
I never saw people that really looked like me on the trail.
It's very white and very male.
The majority of Republicans don't believe President Biden was legitimately elected. More than half of white evangelicals think that too. It was that lie that led to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol that left 5 people dead. They meet in a small wooden cabin. There's a big American flag hanging on the wall that looks to be crocheted by hand. Video shows people milling around before the sermon starts, the vast majority of them white. Young and old, they greet each other with hugs and smiles. No one is wearing a mask.
Christian nationalism is a threat to a pluralistic democratic society.
Over the years, Americans have probably coined more epithets for poor whites than for any other group, even including blacks. Rednecks and hillbillies, white trash and trailer trash, Okies and Arkies, Peckerwoods and Pinelanders, crackers and clay eaters, mudsills and ridge runners, and dozens more. The era of redneck chic began in the 1970s, when the word became a badge of working-class patriotism and authenticity, as contrasted with the PC airs and affectations of the coastal elites. When you call yourself a redneck, you're not simply proclaiming your authenticity. You're calling out the scorn and condescension of the people who use the word as a slur. That's why the word always sounds a little belligerent, and why it encapsulates the populist anger and resentment that the Trump campaign has stirred. As the Los Angeles Times columnist Gregory Rodriguez put it, you know you're a redneck when you're mad as hell and you just want to spread it around.
So I actually do think it is valuable for conservatives to listen to NPR, especially conservatives like me who have jobs for which they have to know what the left is thinking. But the reason I stopped listening is that I just learned everything there was to know. Not in life, but in terms of leftist ideology. The left actually have a very limited set of ideas. And NPR got really predictable. I knew everything that they were going to say in every broadcast on every topic before the presenter even started talking. As soon as I heard the topic, I knew exactly what they were going to say. It has been quite a while, though, so I should probably take a week and refresh my NPR talking point repository. And the reason I think that NPR in particular is so valuable is that they're actually further left than most other news organizations. Before Trump, CNN always tried to at least appear neutral. Sure, they were left, but they tried to be as much toward the center as they could be without actually being in the center. But of course, since Donald Trump has been elected, that they've shifted quite far. And you might say, well, MSNBC, well, they're far further left than anything else. They're way far left. Yeah, but they've gone so far left that they can't even be taken seriously. Like, they're not necessarily presenting the talking points of the mainstream left or the intellectual left. They're like a clown show over there. But NPR, they take every political issue seriously. They will address it in depth, and they will present the most thorough hard left take on the issue of just about any news media organization. And so aside from reading an in-depth leftist article in the Washington Post or the New Yorker, and that can be excruciating, NPR really does provide the best insight into the mind of the leftist intellectual elite in America. So yeah, I would like to see NPR live on, but I'm not subject to their brainwashing. I am immune. So this is just me being selfish at the expense of the rest of humanity. The truth is, NPR needs to die. When a propaganda machine like NPR takes itself seriously, it presents its propaganda in a way that sounds sincere. That is, they genuinely believe what they are reporting is accurate, and so they present it in a way that comes across as truthful. And leftists who listen to NPR are particularly vulnerable to this kind of propaganda because it's what they want to believe. And NPR maintains a very slick production standard. They sound professional. And on top of everything else, these people sound intelligent. They use big words, and that absurd monotone delivery creates the illusion that these are dispassionate journalists simply presenting the truth to the listener, untarnished by personal bias. Of course, everything they report is saturated with personal bias. It's just a uniform personal bias within the NPR staff. And so it seems to them objective. If everybody they know believed the same thing, well, then it must be true, right?
Where did the coronavirus come from? One theory that the White House is promoting, a theory for which they have yet to produce any evidence, is that the virus leaked from a Chinese lab.
There's evidence that conspiracy theories are becoming more and more mainstream. That's according to a new NPR Ipsos poll out today.
40% of poll respondents believe one of the biggest conspiracy theories that's out there about the virus, that it was made in a lab in China. There is no evidence for this, and scientists say that the virus was transmitted to humans from another species. But I talked to people all over the country who responded to our poll, and they still believe this. Our poll found that 1/3 of Americans believe that voter fraud helped Joe Biden win the election. Again, to be clear, there is no evidence that widespread fraud affected the outcome of the election. Another finding of this poll is that 39% of Americans believe that there is a deep state that is working to undermine President Trump.
Wow, those numbers are jarring.
Does our traditional commitment to unfettered free speech still serve democracy? So we have had this idea for a long time that free speech is precious and that the answer to bad speech or hateful speech is not censorship, but more speech. And you say that a number of scholars are beginning to rethink this.
I think the question I have right now is whether this very sunny vision that there's a marketplace of ideas and the better ideas are going to win out, whether that's really true.
The claim by people, as you write, almost exclusively on the right, is that not just that he was paid millions to be on the board of this company, we knew that, the Ukrainian company, but that he arranged for the head of that company to have a visit with his father, influence peddling. Does anything from this laptop ever prove that?
No. I mean, what it proves is that there are communications that suggest that things like that might have taken place. There is an email in which someone contacts Hunter Biden to say thank you for having, it's in sort of broken English, but having set up a meeting or arranged for him to have met his father, who was then the vice president. And all of that would certainly, if it were true, would fly in the face of President Biden's claims that he had no involvement, no knowledge whatsoever of his son's business practices or his business dealings in Ukraine or anywhere. But that's all that it is at this point, is just kind of things that are interesting. But, when people talk about, is the laptop real? Is it fake? Is the whole thing made up? What we're really talking about is this data contain legitimate information, or is this data completely like nonsense? Was it completely generated from nothing? Is it all just like political nonsense created by Donald Trump and his allies? And I guess the answer lies somewhere in the middle. It errs more on the side of it is real. It has now been corrupted completely.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, a set of values many corporations and educational institutions deploy to create environments that welcome people of all races, ethnicities, religions, genders, abilities, and sexual orientations.
This wasn't just a rowdy crowd getting excited unexpectedly. This was premeditated. The defeated president spent 8 weeks orchestrating an attempt to overturn the election results, and ultimately, going down to the Capitol and making a speech saying, I'll be there with you. I'll walk down to the Capitol.
Why are white nationalists and conspiracy theorists there? What appeals to them about the Trump campaign specifically?
Well, presumably they're there because they like Trump and they like some of his hardline stances. A lot of the words, the fiery rhetoric he uses to describe immigrants and Muslims, there's not much daylight between that and the talking points of the far right. And authorities say right-wing violence is the deadliest, the most active form of domestic extremism. And there's pressure for the president to acknowledge that.
That was NPR's Hannah Alam. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But as absurd as these things seem to us, NPR listeners really believe this stuff. And it kind of makes sense. These NPR producers, writers, and presenters, these are not unintelligent, uneducated people. These folks are masters of the English language. Exactly what you want in a world-class propaganda organization. And here's what's really enticing about NPR to the left-wing intellectual elite in America. People like to feel smart. That is, we often read an acclaimed novel or watch an intellectually stimulating film or even watch the news, not because the story is interesting or the information is valuable, but because it makes us feel smart. And that probably sounds petty and silly, and yeah, it kind of is. But I actually think that this is a normal human impulse. There is something clean and elegant about intellectual pursuits. And that's a good thing, because feeling a bit posh, as the British like to say, that can motivate intellectual curiosity. And whether your education is driven by formal education or your job or simply the clean, elegant, posh feeling of intellectual stimulation, well, it's all good. It all helps to educate and improve a person. So I don't really mind that. I don't really mind reading a sophisticated sounding novel because you want to feel smart. I don't mind watching the news because it makes you feel educated. I don't mind a person watching a foreign film just because it makes them feel a little bit more sophisticated. I think all of these things are actually kind of good. However, NPR has really exploited this human impulse in a very powerful and effective way. You got these radical left propagandists. They present fake news, misinformation, lies, whatever you want to call it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they present this information with authentic sincerity, intellectual language, and a professional polish that all create a veneer of credibility. And this makes NPR extremely influential. And extremely influential propaganda is extremely dangerous. The problem is, of course, that truth really does matter. I know that seems absurd to say, but when the CEO of NPR says that a reverence for the truth is a distraction, and that it's better to focus on the best of what we can know right now, whatever the hell that means, when people with this much power say things like that, well, then it becomes necessary to say, yeah, the truth really does matter. And why would somebody even promote this idiotic idea? Why would somebody even think this? If you can convince people that what you believe, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's based on lies, is actually superior to logical ideas based on objective facts, well, then you can convince that person to believe anything. You have essentially become that person's God. And that is exactly what the left wants. They want to be your God. And it's particularly sinister because I am the target of these narcissistic degenerates, me and every other straight white male the world over. In particular, the conservatives. We have been taught to abandon bigotry in America, but the left, they never really abandoned it. They just pivoted. Instead of enslaving black people or stripping them of their basic human rights, they've now turned their attention to the conservative straight white male. But as I said, these are not stupid people. They have a way with rhetoric, these leftists. And so they twist this vicious bigotry into a beautiful story of inclusion and acceptance.
Right, because in thinking about the current push to dismantle DEI, DEI encompasses everyone. It's racial, gender, and disability equity.
And the worst part, I think they often believe their own bullshit. Because this chick, she thinks that truth is subjective. And this is an extremely common view on the left. She thinks that the perspective of white males, me, is inherently flawed and incomplete.
For all my love for Wikipedia, I'm not here to sell you on its perfection. I do view it as pretty flawed. It is famously written by men, about 80% of its contributors, which means that there's so much missing from the other half of the human experience.
And this is now a fundamental view of leftists. The perspective of women and non-white races and religions other than Christianity and non-white cultures, and the perspective of gay people and trans people, these perspectives are all more valuable to them than that of the straight white man. Forget the fact that straight white men constitute a broad spectrum of perspectives. The way leftists see it, the collective experiences, thoughts, and ideas of straight white men cannot possibly present the world accurately. Apparently, our ability to perceive things accurately and to think about those things logically is somehow impaired because of our straight white maleness. Only the sophisticated, clean, and purely rational perspective of women, black people, illegal immigrants, Muslims, indigenous people from technologically primitive tribes, gays, lesbians, transgender men and women, furries, otherkin, people with gratuitous body modifications, and minor attracted persons. Only these brilliant perspectives can give us the full truth of the world. Fuck right off. Travel a little bit, lady. Go to a third world country. Go live in a poor black neighborhood in any Democrat-run city in America. Go to Africa. Live in Liberia for a year. Then come back and talk to me about the superiority of the perspectives of other cultures, of other races.
A lot of people would drink or do drugs before fighting?
Yeah, most of my boys.
Yeah.
Then we drain the blood from the innocent child and drink it before going to battle.
So you kill the child?
Yes.
and then drink the blood.
Yeah.
It started as a back to Africa movement for freed slaves. So the freed slaves go back to Africa and promptly enslave the native Africans.
I know somebody who want to kill me. If I grab you, I will kill you. Raw.
It's a post-apocalyptic Armageddon with child soldiers smoking heroin, cross-dressing cannibals, systematic rape. It's total hell on earth. So West Point is the worst slum in Liberia, which makes it one of the worst slums in West Africa, which makes it one of the worst slums in the world. Open sewers everywhere, shit, piss, garbage, everything mixed in, and the stench is overpowering.
The people here don't have toilets, and because they have no toilets, they use the fish.
Diseases everywhere. Malaria, infections, and AIDS are rampant.
These electronic shops,
Yeah.
they are just cover up.
Cover up for heroin.
For heroin.
Wow.
It's a big business. Behind these areas are small shops that are used as brothels.
So how much is that?
Less than $1.
70% of the female population has been raped. 80% of the population is unemployed. And a large percentage of the population has eaten human flesh.
Notice the way that this woman speaks. She has this slow, deliberate delivery, typical of a TED Talk and much like the presenters on NPR.
And of course, it has been written by the victors. All of the peoples and countries and cultures that have historically not dominated our understanding of world history are also missing in many ways from the written word.
This is the way the left-wing intellectual elite like to consume their propaganda. They like their lies clear and precise. When I was a kid, leftists used to preach about having an open mind. There was a poster on the wall of my English teacher's door. This is, I think, when I was a junior in high school. It read, "A mind is like a parachute. It only works when open." This was an extremely common refrain in the 1990s, and conservatives tended to agree with this. We didn't scream about it constantly like the left did, but we didn't tend to refute it. It was right, I think. Maybe not universally, like probably don't open your mind to heroin addiction or Satanism, but in terms of political opinions, yeah, it's a good rule to accept the possibility that you might be wrong about some things. But this was never actually a principle on the left. It was a dictate to conservatives. We often say that if the left didn't have double standards, they would have no standards at all. And it's because of stuff like this. Leftists want conservatives to open their minds up to leftist ideas, but asking a leftist to open their mind to a conservative idea, well, that's about as productive as asking a male feminist to talk without a gay lisp. These folks never took this idea seriously. It was just another leftist trick to get conservatives to accept their idiotic ideas. And their ideas about truth, that this woman is promoting, the idea that truth is subjective and it requires a broad spectrum of race and genders and sexual orientations and gender identities and all this other crap in order to get to the full truth, well, this is all just to cover up the true motivation of this woman. She is a bigot. Once again, this boils down to leftist bigotry. She's bigoted against straight white men. And that has really become a massive part of the leftist platform. When they call for diversity, it's really a call for fewer straight white men. When they want to amplify black voices or female voices or gay voices or trans voices or whatever, what they really mean is they want fewer straight white male voices. This is a cultural coup, and NPR has been a massively effective propaganda engine in this culture war, and it is a war. They're not fighting for equality, they're fighting for total domination, and sadly, they're winning. All right, now don't forget to check out the live stream Toxic Masculinity every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific. And also check out the Toxic Masculinity merch at my t-shirt store. Support the Mr. Reagan channel and help me in my quest to save the world. All right, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Should we stop funding NPR? I think I know the answer, but go ahead and let me know what you think in the comment section below. And remember, it's not that the liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.